Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture Albion Never Dies. Why does an imposing James Bond henchman wear a school turban? This is the podcast episode that will answer this important question, which you may never have asked, but are surely now desperate to have an answer to. 40 years ago, Del Singh was involved in a very unorthodox way with the 007 franchise. This interview with him is so great, so fun and so lively, it cannot be constrained to a single podcast episode. In this first of two parts, Del explains how he became involved with the filming of Octopussy after receiving a phone call out of the blue from EON Productions, the dream for any James Bond fan. He talks about his time with Roger Moore and Kabir Bedi, who played the imposing Gobinda, and even Del's input into the latter character's wardrobe. Del comments on the best and worst place for a movie crew to buy a turban. Del talked to Roger Moore about his take on Sean Connery's 007 and talks about how Moore dealt with this question a bit differently in sessions with journalists, and also reveals what Roger Moore claimed he could do as Bond that Sean Connery could not. The answer comes at minute 26. We also hear what Moore said his favourite film was, minute 27, and hear about Roger Moore's experiences filming The Wild Geese with Richard Burton and Richard Harris. Now, the spectacular train stunts in Octopussy were filmed at the Nene Valley Railway near Peterborough, where Del hails from, back before CGI could be used for such scenes. So we also hear about Del's memories of watching those incredible stunts done on location and the immense risks involved. Del says they rarely do earn their money. Please do enjoy part one of this interview with Del.
Thomas, thank you for inviting me on to talk to you today. Delighted to do that.
And thank you very much for hopping on, Del. And you were involved with the movie Octopussy.
So yes, I was involved in the film. Imagine it 40 years ago this year that the film came out. So, well, how time flies and how, gosh, I have aged. It's dreadful. But yes, I was involved in probably not a very sort of orthodox way, I would say. I mean, there's quite a lot of people were involved as extras and did their bit. So I guess if I had some context to it, the film hops, as most Bond films do, kind of hops around the world in some very exotic locations. They tend to cover. So I think in Octopussy, they're filming in India. They were filming kind of out in the States and also Peterborough. The exotic location that is Peterborough. Now, not many people think, why did they want to film in Peterborough? Well, actually, the reason they filmed in Peterborough is because we have a wonderful steam railway here called the Nene Valley Railway, which actually features in the film as really the method of the divide between East and West Germany, because obviously the film in the 80s was set during that Cold War period. And that premise, without giving it away to any one person in the world that hasn't seen the film, is that there's the transportation of a nuclear device from kind of East Germany to West Germany. And that's done on a train. And that train's a steam train. And they effectively used the steam railway in Peterborough to emulate that border crossing from east to west. And just, credit to the folks at Nene Valley Railway. They've done a marvellous job at sort of having restored the steam railway. And in fact, it's been used. It was also used in GoldenEye. So it's got a double Bond connection. The parts of there was some scenes filmed for GoldenEye with Pierce Brosnan, and also for the Queen video of Breakthrough, the song Breakthrough. So the late Freddie and the gang all filmed at Nene Valley Railway. For a couple of days, but I was there for probably just around a month or so when Octopussy was filmed. So, and it's rather sort of strange. So if I rewind back to 1982, 41 years ago, when I was a lot fresher faced as a 20-year-old. I was just about to go off to university, and the summer of. So I was kind of like with my brother and I, just older than me. We had jobs in a local cold store. We were kind of freezing peas. Somebody's got to do it. It's a job. And we were doing that, sort of getting ready to go off to university. But as a sideline, my brother and I also ran a mobile roadshow. Now, it wasn't just just a disco. We ran a rock disco. It wasn't just a rock disco; it was a heavy rock disco. I know it sounds crazy. People are already thinking there, and I guarantee you, there is nowhere in the universe that a couple of Sikh lads were running a heavy rock disco, but in Peterborough in 1980s. If anyone knows of anyone else that's doing it, please let me know, because I would love to find out. But so we were running these. So we would kind of set up our stuff, and we would play AC/DC, Black Sabbath, or Meatloaf, and all this stuff for bikers, and it was a great gig. And so the Singh Brothers Roadshow was quite famous around Peterborough and a bit further afield for doing these kind of biker gigs. And one of the things we used to do was we used to put these gigs on at local halls and venues. And what we would do is we would go out at night and illegally fly post, just make sure nobody's listening. So we would go out fly posting and putting up, or as Americans call it, bill stickers, where we go out, one of us jump out with a pot of paste, the other put the poster up, we'd call it, jump in the car before the police or somebody saw us and drive off and so on. So, and we would often do this. So the Singh Brothers name would be kind of on these posters around. And we would, and this is the age before internet, before mobile phones, or the only way of communication was, if not face to face, was effectively a landline, a telephone line. And so we used to get our bookings from people phoning up and saying, hey, I want to book a disco. And that was the way we did it. And we had a little ad in the Yellow Pages. And then just one evening, I remember answering the phone, and I said, Singh Brothers disco too, thinking this is a booking, and a couple of questions. And I'm thinking, yep, here come the questions. And the questions would normally be along the lines of, do you have a big light show, speakers? Do you do weddings, bar mitzvahs, whatever? Do you do whatever? What sort of music do you play? Instead, he just asked, are you a Sikh? And I'm like, yes. Do you wear a turban? And I'm like, well, yes. What's this got to do with booking a disco? And this was also an age and a time when, because of what we did, and I was going to say, British society and politics was quite polarised. In fact, it's actually probably almost it is now. And it was quite right wing. And we used to get a lot of stuff, threats and stuff from far right groups like National Front. So we'd often appear in the papers, and we'd get stuff dropped through our letterbox, saying that they were going to, we played disco, they were going to break it up, called us the P word, which, I said it made a pleasant change, having dog feces put through your letterbox, having, mail that was spelt incorrectly. Somebody could just about get a 4-letter word right. That's was the mentality of these people. But so I thought, this is just some guy winding me up. So I'm about to say, well, thank you very much and goodbye, and, whatever it was. And he's like, no, please stop. This is serious. I'm phoning from EON Productions. And being a Bond fan, I knew who EON Productions straight away. So I was like, what, EON Productions, as in the guys that make those Bond films? Yes. And you're phoning me, why? Well, we're making a Bond film and we need your help. And I'm like, whoa. For a split second, that sort of, I just visioned myself in a sort of tux with a bow tie, thinking, Rogers, had it. They want to stand in, a diverse, who knows? But that fleeting second just disappeared when the guy said, well, actually, we need somebody to tie a turban.
Oh.
And I said, tie a turban? I said, yes, because we're filming what is the 13th Bond film, Octopussy. We're filming it not far from Peterborough, just outside Peterborough, that's near the railway. And the villain in the film is an Indian actor called Kabir Bedi, playing Gobinda, the kind of henchman, the Bond villain. And although he's Indian, he doesn't wear a turban. And in the film, he wears a turban. And so we need somebody to tie a turban.
Oh.
I know. It still sounded a bit peculiar.
Yeah.
And so he said, look, if you can come to this hotel, and we only had like one 5-star hotel in Peterborough at the time. If you come to this hotel tomorrow, we can talk more about it. Oh, and do bring a turban with you. Look, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So my brother and I actually went to this hotel the next day, kind of got there thinking, any minute now, some of our friends are going to jump out and just say, yeah, got you, wind up. You've been pranked, whatever. But a guy turns up and he's got a lanyard with that Octopussy logo on it, and introduced himself, and then sort of took us upstairs to what was effectively the whole of the top of the hotel they'd sort of seemed to have taken out while they were in Peterborough filming. And as we walked through the door, my eyes just literally, over to the left, and there's big pool of smoke going up, and sat underneath the smoke is Roger Moore with a big cigar. And I'm like, geez, this is actually real. This is that's Roger Moore's Bond. And so, a bit kind of awestruck. And then we had Kabir walked over, and he's a lovely guy, really tall guy, statuesque chap, quite imposing. Big hand and hi, hello, and it's like these guys can tie the turban and whatever. And he was like, oh, okay, good. And he spoke Punjabi with us, and we did too. And he was really pleasant. And then they pulled out this turban and said, "Can you tie this on his head?" And I looked at this thing and I said, "Nah." And they said, "What?" I said, "Nah, I can't tie that on his head." And they said, "Sorry, you said you could tie a turban." I said, "I can tie a turban. That's not a turban. That's a bath towel." And they kind of like looked and they said, "Why?" I said, "Because this is a turban." And now a turban, including the one I'm wearing on my head here, is about sort of 15 foot long. Okay, so when you unravel it and open it out, it's about sort of 14, 15 foot long. And when you to give it that sort of shape, probably about 12 foot. This one sort of, but I think it's a lengthy piece of material. I think they brought out was about 6 foot material. So I said, "That's Charles turban." And I sort of flippantly said, I said to them, "Where the hell did you buy this?" And they said, "India." I said, "Well, they saw you coming because they've obviously robbed you." That was it. I said, "Probably the worst place to buy a turban. You should have bought one in Southall." But joking aside, I then took out the turban, which is funny enough is a grey turban. It was my sixth form school turban. Having just finished sixth form, it was part of and I tied this on Kabir's head, and he kind of sort of he moved his head around. He said, "That's not going anywhere." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, the problem is with the thing I've been tying on my head, as soon as I get up and do the outdoor filming, especially on top of the trains, because he has to run along the top of the train, same with the stuntman, he goes, as soon as I get on top of the train, gust of wind catches it and it falls off." And I said, "This isn't going anywhere." He goes, "No, I can feel it, absolutely not." And so they actually changed the colour of the turban to match. They actually decided to go with the grey for that, and his suit. They changed his wardrobe and everything to match the turbans. Funny enough, because it was going to be a dark colour he was wearing, I ended up actually, having to supply more turbans. So they said, "Look, that's great. You're kind of hired, but we only need one of you. And there's two of you, so we only need one of you." Now, my brother and I both knew we had these summer jobs, and the trouble is, if one of us called to work that day, the other could fill in, and we didn't want to give the game away. So I just said, "Sorry, we come as a team. We're a pair. It's the Singh brothers, plural, and you hire." And they said, "Well, we're paying £50 a day, £25 each." I said, "No, £50 each," because they'd already told us the price. I said, "You have to pay us £50 each." And now this is 1982. That's a lot of money, and this was 5 minutes work. And they sort of started getting a little shirty. They were like, "No, we don't think that's going to work." I was like, "Well, not a problem. Take the turban, go home. Good luck finding somebody else to tie a turban around Peterborough who knows what they're doing." And they were looking, and I said, "I'm not being funny, but you are EON Productions. You're spending millions on a film, and you're quibbling over 50 quid. I'm sorry. I really don't get it." But anyway, good luck to you. And they stopped. They stopped. They came back and said, "No, please come back." And I remember Kabir saying, he goes, "That's what Indian people do. They negotiate hard." And he goes, "That was brilliant." He goes, and he said, "I want these guys. I don't care what you pay them. I want these guys. They're really good." And in fact, so we got the gig. And as it happens, I mean, my brother probably wasn't there as much as I was, because he was on mainly on nights, and I was on I was on nights. He was on days, so I could actually do the shooting and then go off and do work at night and stuff while he was kind of coming home and having a kip. But we mixed it around, and so that's how we got the gig, which is, like I said, really bizarre story in itself, about kind of getting the actual gig and negotiating with them and doing that. So I don't know if you've got any questions around any of that.
No, that's fantastic, and I'm slightly startled they didn't know how long a turban is.
No, well, I think what's happened is, I mean, they vary in length. They vary in length, and for someone the size of Kabir, a tall guy, he needed something that was big and it stood out a little bit. And it was whatever. It's bizarre, but like I said, I think they just sort of ended up, somebody saw them coming and just sold them some of these kind of like smallish ones. And sometimes in India, in some of these other countries, they do wear relatively small ones. They call a buggery, which is, it goes around twice, but it's quite loose. Whereas a proper turban, it goes around. It has multiple layers to it and so on, and a top part that pulls out the back. So it's only one piece of material. People keep saying to me, "So you put this on and then you put something on the top?" I said, "No, it's actually one piece of material." It's quite intricate.
Yeah, and quite the technique, as you say. You must have been the only person within a fair radius who knew, apart from your brother.
No, I mean, there were a few other people, but quite frankly, I mean, they were going to good luck finding them, and I wasn't going to direct them. And what was really interesting, I mean, I didn't give myself this title, by the way. So I do actually have a photographic copy of one of the movie call sheets, and it actually sort of says 7:45, turban expert arrives on location. I became the turban expert. Now I'm not on the credits, I'm not listed on that and stuff, but whilst filming, it's the turban expert. So it was great to kind of have that sort of unique title.
That is unique. I'm also interested that they changed the costume to match the turban that you gave.
Yeah, well, when you actually look at the film, I mean, Kabir, the guy would have looked elegant wearing anything. And as it happens, that turban just went so well. They got the rest of his outfit with the grey suit that he wears when he's actually in the train. I mean, when he's in India, he's wearing kind of more of an Indian kind of like dark brown sort of a suit, kind of, you know, with an Indian kind of kurta pajama suits. But on this, that grey just went really well with the turban. I mean, when I look at the stills even now, it just fit. And as it happens, they needed more than the one turban because they had to go and film elsewhere. And then they said, we've got to come back, we've got to do stuntmen films. And if we need it again. And I ended up selling them 4 of my turbans. At 50 quid each, that's 200 quid for 4 turbans. I mean, you know, Mum was like, you can't sell your turbans. I was like, Mum, I've left school now. I don't even wear these ones. I'll wear I started wearing darker colours. And so, you know, when I told her I was getting £200 for 4 turbans, she goes, "Are they crazy?" I said, "They're a film studio, Mum. They can afford it. Trust me."
And now your school turbans are immortalised in film.
Well, they are. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say to people, look, you know, long after I've shuffled off this mortal coil, whilst my kind of face for radio isn't going to be in the film, my hairstyle is immortalised on celluloid.
I went to a special screening of Octopussy very recently, and we're all commenting on what a well-dressed guy he is and how great he looks on screen. So you were a part of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to say, I mean, he still is actually. I mean, Kabir's still active and out there. He's a very dashing chap and a true gentleman, absolutely brilliant. I got to know him really well during the filming, and yeah, he just really looked the part. I mean, I know he was relatively unknown because he'd done things like, I think, Sandokan the Pirate, which was actually made in Italy, of all things. It was a little bit like a spaghetti western, but a spaghetti pirate thing. And so I mean, even to this day, he's absolutely phenomenal. He's huge in Italy. They love him. He was on the Big Brother, the version of Big Brother in Italy, and people just loved him on that, and they know him. So he's more popular, I think, India, Italy, Britain, then the USA. And it was after he'd got the gig in Octopussy, he then got the show Dynasty, which is a spin-off from Dallas. So he was on that as well. So it really did. It launched his kind of career on the biggest stage there. But he is, and yeah, but he definitely looked the part in that film.
Absolutely. And you also said that you were the expert for the stuntmen as well.
Yeah, because what happened is when after the kind of the A-list or the stars had left, the crew stayed behind to actually film some of the stunt scenes and stuff like that, and they therefore needed me to tie the turban on the head of the stuntmen who were filling in for Kabir, and you know, so those scenes running at the top of the train, you know, those were all filmed static with Kabir and Roger and whatever, and then obviously when they'd left, it was left up to the stuntmen to do the motion sequences and so on, the train going at speed. And I have to say there was a really awful incident where one of the stuntmen got very seriously injured because his shoulder actually, you know, just didn't pull out in time, and it hit the tunnel quite hard. There's no, you know, there literally is very little of a gap there, and he was taken to hospital. I mean, there were some horrible things that happened there, stories that just were amazing, and you could always see health and safety. I mean, back in '82, there probably wasn't such a thing as health and safety. I'm sure there was some risk assessments, but that was it. And he was taken to hospital, and it put him out. You know, it affected his career for quite some time. Actually, I think that was. So yeah, that was that. So like I say, I returned there. So it was pretty much, you know, about 3 weeks with the actual stars and about a week with the stunt team there. So about a month on set.
And so, I mean, there were some terrible incidents. It looks dangerous, and it rarely is. Which is an amazing sequence to watch, technically.
Well, Thomas, it is amazing, and it's also amazing because now those sort of sequences would be done with CGI.
Yeah,
and they still look impressive. But you wouldn't worry about it. But back then, none of that stuff. I mean, probably one of the most impressive sequences in the film, and certainly one that I've ever seen, and I think, and it was done for real, is the sequence in there where Roger has the big black Mercedes that hits the tracks and the tires shred, and basically the wheels are on the rails and it's going along aside the train, and he's got to jump off this onto the train. And then as he's about to do it, he looks forward and he sees a train coming the other way. And, and just as he jumps, the other train hits the Mercedes and the Mercedes flies off.
Yeah.
Now, and when it flies off the tracks, it doesn't just fly off the tracks, it flies off into the river, and there's two guys fishing in a boat.
Yes.
And this car hits the boat literally square on where the guys are in it. Now, that for me was probably one of the most frightening things I've ever seen in my life. I mean, there's two ways. So a couple of things. Firstly, a train hitting a car like that, the car would just kind of like go off the side and that's it. So what they did was they actually had to fire that Mercedes in a cannon. So there was a cannon erected on the side of the railway track. And for that sequence, they basically loaded this. They had a number of old Mercedes there. So they loaded this kind of 2-ton car into this cannon, a massive explosive charge under it, and they fired it over the top into the river. And the first time they did it, it kind of landed quite a distance away from the boat. It just didn't look very effective. So they kind of like recalibrated it based on where the boat was. And the second time they did it was scary as hell, because that car literally just landed on top of the boat. And I think one of the stuntmen I saw getting out, the other stuntman, I thought, he's not made it out. That car hit. It's just kind of like that. And the frogman went into the water, and we were just like, oh my God, this is not looking good. And then literally saw some bubbles coming up, and the guy had gone into the water and come out the other end. And he was like, I'm okay. And it was, that's a take. You couldn't, I mean, when you see that film, that sequence, that was done that time that was a second take they did, and they got it, but it was really risky. And, I mean, that guy must have been inches away from death. I mean, this 2-ton thing just landing on you, dragging you down with it, but he managed to get far enough away to get away from it. But it was, it's like I say, it's quite scary, but that sort of stuff would all be done with CGI now. There's no way that they'd probably be doing that.
Yeah, every time I watch the film, that's the one bit that really hits me, as they jump out of the boat, but the boat obviously moves. It's a boat.
It's like I say, they literally, I mean, one of the guys you see getting out a little bit early, the other guy, you don't even see him getting out. You think, and then you realise there was another guy there. I watched it several times over. But, like I say, he got out, and it was literally split second that a few seconds either which way, that guy might have actually died. So it was quite scary watching, but watching it there, it was like, blimey, these guys and those stuntmen really do earn their money.
Yes, yeah, wow, yeah, that must have been so memorable. So you were sitting by the banks of the river watching this unfold.
Yeah, well, I was quite fortunate. So because unlike, I mean, there were a number of people recruited locally as extras. Now, for them, some of them will have got their faces on the film, some of them will have got the back of their heads on the film, some will be in the distant shot. The only downside was that they actually had to stand outside in all weathers. And, and so when the light faded or it got windy and rainy, the actors would all come into their trailers. These guys have to stand out there in case it improved and get called out. Now, I was lucky because I wasn't an extra, but because I had access to all areas past, because what actually happened was I'd have to be in there in the morning in Kabir's trailer to tie the turban and stuff, and continuity would come in and they'd go around, they'd check it all, and they'd do all of that. And then he'd go off, do his scene and stuff. And basically, he just said to me, trailer's yours. You stay here as long as you like, do what you're going to do, and that sort of stuff. And his trailer was literally next door to Roger's. And so one of the things that was really, really nice was I'd often just come out and I'd sit there, read a book or something, and or I'd come out and sort of sit on the stoop. And Roger would be sitting on the stoop of his trailer with a cigar. I was very scared and nervous at first to approach him. I was literally, because I didn't want to come across as just a fanboy. It's like, Mr. Moore and whatever. So I said to him, look, I remember the first time I actually spoke to him properly was like that. And I sort of said to him, hope you don't mind me asking, but I'm a massive fan of Richard Burton. And I was, and still am to this day. I think he's probably one of my favourite actors of all time. And I said, you worked with Richard on The Wild Geese. What's it like working with Richard Burton? He said, well, working with Richard Burton would be, under any circumstances, a joy. But he goes, in this instance, it wasn't. I was like, why? He said, well, it wasn't just Richard Burton, because he had two Richards, Richard Harris and Richard Burton. So he goes, when you've got one person that can be quite volatile, and then you got other person who just acts as a catalyst. The filming was delayed, and because these two were more often than not, he wasn't being unprofessional. They were kind of like either drunk or not on set or whatever it was, or disruptive. He goes, it was fun in hindsight, but he goes, it was an awkward shoot. Because I asked him if the rumours are true about people like Richard Burton, being a bit of a kind of drinker and stuff. He said, yeah. He goes, but he was minor league compared to Richard Harris. Richard Harris, he said, was just like. I remember watching an interview with Richard Harris on Wogan many years later, where he sort of said he'd gone out to buy a pint of milk, told his wife he's going to buy a pint of milk, and I think he came home 3 months later or something. He ended up in a squat or something with some students. So we got chatting like that, and I had some very interesting conversations with him. I mean, he would, I remember, because he would call me Mr. Singh, and I'd call him, I didn't want to be familiar by calling Roger, so I'd say, Mr. Moore. A couple of times I called him Sir. I'm not your headmaster, am I? And we kind of have a bit of a laugh and joke, and so we talked about that. And I like films. I did say to him, he sort of said, obviously I like the Bond franchise. I said, yeah, I'm a big fan. And I said, if I'm going to be honest with you, I said I'm a Connery fan, big, because it's the first Bond films I watched, and he said, no, nothing wrong with that. He goes, I'm a massive Connery fan. He said, if it wasn't for Sean, doing Bond, I wouldn't be doing Bond today, because to be fair, he's established Bond there, but my Bond is different. And I said, yeah, I could see it. And by that, I'd watch things like Live and Let Die, Man with the Golden Gun. I thought, brilliant. And so it's different. And I know when journalists, because around that time, Warner's had just brought Sean Connery back to do Never Say Never Again.
Yes.
And so the media were making a real sort of, big hullabaloo about this, which is, and when they came to interview him, and I often stood back to one side watching, and there were some people interviewing him and the media, and they'd say things like, so Roger, I guess is it a case the public aren't happy with you as Bond, and that's why they got Sean back? And they try to goad him. And Roger was an absolute gentleman. He was like, well, look, Sean's going to be Bond for a lot of people. It's not an EON thing. It's a Warner's thing. It's a different Bond. It sounds like it's a remake of Thunderball, which it was, and not a very good one, I have to say. And basically, there was a lovely episode where he sort of said to this one journalist, he goes, well, look, Sean does his thing as Bond. I do mine. He goes, what do you do that Sean doesn't? Or what, he goes, this thing, and he said something like, yeah, I can do things that Sean can't, and vice versa. And they all leaned in. What is it you do that Sean doesn't do? And they thought, we're going to get some ammo on here. And he said, well, okay, go. And they all got a bit closer. He goes, see, I can do this, and Sean can't. And he did that eyebrow raise, which just Roger Moore does. And he goes, Sean can't do that. But he goes, at the same time, he's got a really hairy chest and I haven't. And I absolutely wetting myself. I thought, brilliant. And these journalists were like, shit. They were expecting some scandalous kind of, thing. And he just sort of came up to the quick with that. And he was brilliant, and we talked films a lot. And I remember we actually even had a conversation about favourite films. Because I said to him, because I'd watched him in The Saint, I'd watched him as Maverick and all this sort of stuff, and I covered a lot of genres and stuff. So is there kind of like a favourite film? And and I guess like anybody asking that question, it's because I wanted him to ask me what mine was. And so he sort of said, oh, that's a tough one. I got so many. I said, yeah, I know too. He goes, what about yours then? And he threw it back at me, and I was like, oh, God. I said, well, actually, I don't have a favourite. I have two favourites. And he goes, oh, okay, go on then. What are the two favourites? And I told him one was The Seven Samurai. Kurosawa Seven Samurai, and the other was the 39 Steps, the Hitchcock version.
Okay.
And he said, both really great films, classic films. And, he said to me, obviously, the Magnificent Seven's based on that. I said, yeah, I do. But I still think the Kurosawa version's better. And he's, yeah, go, that's good. And I said, what about you? And I finally got it out of him. It's High Noon.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
High Noon. And you know what? I actually said to him, I remember saying to him, you know what, I think you would have been great in that Gary Cooper role. He goes, God, I hope they never, ever remake that film, because he goes, that for me is a perfect film. And Gary Cooper was that vulnerable, guy that then becomes the hero, and Grace Kelly was fabulous, and you know what, and I guess because he had this love of westerns, because he'd done Maverick and he'd done that genre, and stuff. He wasn't always into spy films, or The Saint and The Persuaders and stuff, but he really did have a love for westerns, and obviously it was great to know that he liked High Noon, so that was quite good. So we had some really interesting conversations, and it was fun. And at the same time, you know, I got to know Kabir quite well as well through the trailer, and then when we came to kind of like wrapping and finishing. You know, Kabir sort of wrote down his address in Hollywood, his phone number, and everything. Gave it to me and said, "Look, you know, feel free to write, phone, keep in touch." And I was like, "Great!" And we had a lovely farewell and so on. And sadly for me, I then went off to university, and as a typical 20-year-old, you know, involved in kind of like a culture of drinking and having fun, I lost his address.
Oh no!
I know, I lost his address, and so it you know, that bit of paper, which is a bit of paper, lost it. Strangely enough, around, you know, 30 odd years later, I'm got a load of books from my old college days. My wife's like in the loft saying, "Can we get rid of these? You're not doing anything. Put them to a shop. Somebody else might benefit." As I'm getting these books out, I'm flicking through, this bloody bit of paper falls out. I look at it. It's got Kabir Bedi, you know, Beverly Hills, whatever. It was not quite 90210, but it was a Beverly Hills zip code and a phone number. And I'm like, "Oh God!" I said, "Dude, that's Kabir Bedi's number." She goes, "Can I phone it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, phone it." It's disconnected, obviously, you know. But
do you have it framed?
But no, well, I think I've still got it. I think the wife's got it now, actually. But she thought she was, you know, castigating me for having lost it. But the interesting thing was, and I thought I'd never see or hear from him again. And then in 2017, a guy who'd heard my, in fact, it was 2017 when Roger Moore passed away, and I wrote a little article on LinkedIn, say my summer with Roger. And I wrote about how I got to know him during that summer and the filming. And a guy at The Guardian picked up on it, and The Guardian contacted me and said, "Can we put this in The Guardian as a little tribute to Roger, along with a few other people's stories?" And I said, "Yes." And they put it in The Guardian. And then some guy who, I think, called TSOS, Turban Seen on Screen, which sounds bizarre, but he asked me if he's going to do a special screening of Octopussy at the Institute of Light in London at Hackney, and said, "I'd love you to come along there and talk about your experiences before we show Octopussy." And I'm trying hard to see if I can get Kabir to kind of like Skype in. And as it happens, he succeeded. And in 2017, after the film, Kabir Skyped in, and we had a kind of like reunion 35 years later. And he said, "Oh, Del was great. We had a wonderful time on set." And it was great listening to him, and the audience enjoyed it. And it was a fabulous screening. So kind of, like I said, I, you know, got to sort of speak to him again, albeit sort of briefly over. He was in Mumbai, I was in London, and we chatted a bit about the film. But the audience thoroughly enjoyed, you know, me recounting my story and him telling them about, you know, how amazing a film it was, and you know how it shaped his career as well. So that's quite something.
Okay, I must draw to a close for this week. But next week we will have part 2 of this interview with Del Singh, as we learn more about the filming of 1983's James Bond film Octopussy. Take care.